Sports Bash live at the Fanatics Sportsbook here at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. I'm Mike Gill. We will be in New Orleans all week long, but the two teams, how did they get here? How were they built? The Business of Sports podcast. Andrew Brandt, he worked in the Eagles front office, long time in the Packers front office, and now his Business of Sports podcast is a must-listen. And on a recent edition, which made me want to reach out to Andrew and talk a little bit more about this, he mentioned the two teams that were the most well-run are the last two teams standing. And, Andrew, that is the Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. And why so many times we look around the league and we look at skill players and talent and quarterbacks and coaches, but sometimes we overlook front office and ownership. And it sounds like in your Business of Sports podcast, you think that these two teams are here for a reason, and it could be ownership and front office that is a big reason why they're here.
Yeah, good to be with you. I always look at when these teams are successful, why are they successful? Why do they have sustained success? And often it comes down to looking closer behind the team, not just on the surface level of on the field or on the court. I think in both these situations, they've really built something special where they've had such sustained success. Sometimes people equate sustained success to Super Bowls, of course, which the Chiefs have, but being successful over a long period of time like the Eagles have been is hard in a business that always reverts to mediocrity. It makes it hard to stay good for good teams. It makes it easier to get better for bad teams through the draft and through all the rules. So I'll go through quick thoughts on each. You know, the Chiefs have been able to manage this team in a way that they rely on the magnificence of Mahomes, and they understand that. So they have an offense that doesn't use a lot of resources from a cap and cash point of view. They have sort of these mid-career receivers and running backs that have been let go by other teams, whether it's Hopkins or Juju Smith-Schuster or Kareem Hunt. They have not been accused of having the best offensive line out there. And, of course, they rely on an aging Kelsey who still can pull off some magic. But, again, it's Mahomes. And they've locked up Mahomes for an extraordinary amount of time, like a 12-year contract. And, yes, they've readjusted it a couple times, but they always have leverage when they have him under contract for so many years. So they've really managed that offense well. And then what they've done on defense is use 6 of 8, 7 of 10, 6 of 9 draft picks over the last 3 years on defense. So they have a developing, young, opportunistic defense that really fits what Steve Spagnuolo wants. Some of these players you look at and say, wow, why'd they take him so high? It's because they fit. And Brett Veach does a great job of molding his players to his coaches for Andy and for Spagnuolo. And, of course, more relevant here, we move to Howie. Howie is a master negotiator. And what we've come to in the NFL is we have a lot of GMs that come solely from a scouting background. And while that's great for picking players, it's not great for being a GM because they get taken advantage of by a master negotiator who's done this forever on the contract and cap side and now takes it to a much easier audience on the GM side. And he has consistently developed good trades where he's won the battle of the trade. He's won contract negotiations, paying players less than other teams pay them. And it's worked. Even when there's dissension for getting a player on the cheap like Hassan Reddick, he just moved the problem out and got a third-round pick for the trouble from the Jets. So everything's kind of worked, and he's really put together a masterful roster.
Andrew, as I'm sure you're aware, he was a pretty polarizing guy years ago. I mean, there were people who just could not stay. I said at one point he may have been the most hated Philadelphia sports figure that I could ever recall. I mean, people just wanted him fired, immediately. But you've worked in this front office, and how much has he learned from mistakes and kind of matured and evolved from where he was, even the first Super Bowl that they won in 2017, to getting back there, to now getting back here a third time, because, he's one of these guys that people hated him. Now it's how he sees it, and they love him, and he can do, he's a very interesting, polarizing figure with this organization.
Yeah, he is. And as you mentioned, I consulted with him and Joe Banner almost 10 years ago when they were moving him. So they were moving him from cap contract to personnel. Andy was still there. And they needed someone like me to come in and sort of handle the cap until they developed a new cap person, contract person. So anyway, I saw it, and I saw and I think what he is still dealing with, even with all the success, is this bias, like people who watch the movie Moneyball, that, hey, you aren't a scout.
Right.
You don't have this ability to pick great players. And what I saw was he worked at it. He wasn't just someone that came in from the financial side and said, now I'm going to go pick players. He went out there, to all these bowl games and to all these campuses, and he worked the craft of scouting to go along with his craft of negotiating. So I always look at people, do they work at it?
Yeah.
Do they have the strong character work ethic no matter what they're doing? And he's done that.
Well, and Andrew, because we're talking with Andrew Brandt, he's host of the Business of Sports podcast. He's worked in the Green Bay and Philadelphia front offices. He was criticized for his drafting. I mean, obviously there's some major blunders where you take Rager over Jefferson. But that happens to everybody. It's just when you make those mistakes, they stand out. But how surprised are you at the way their draft has gone the last 3 years? I mean, they have hit almost a home run in almost every single pick, it seems like, the last 3 years.
Yeah, well, you can even focus on this year. I mean, they were a great team last year for most of the season until it fell apart. But then they have a weakness at outside linebacker. They bring in this Baum, who turns into an all-pro. A weakness at corner. They draft 2 that may be starting for the next 10 years. They have a weakness at defensive coordinator. They bring in the best one in the league. They have a weakness at running back. They bring in the best one in the league. I mean, it's just home run after home run. And I think they took a roster that I thought was pretty stacked last year, and they made it even more stacked. Listen, I know people, believe me, I married into a Philadelphia sports family. People can be critical, and sometimes they've kind of sleptwalked their way through some of these games. But I'm pretty certain they're the most talented roster in the NFL, and they'll be the most talented team on the field on Sunday. So it will not surprise me or anyone if they win this game. Well, and just putting it together then, yeah.
Andrew, so I listened to your podcast, and you touched on it a little bit here. You talked about how the Chiefs, they spent their money, with the quarterback and then on defense, and then they've kind of got some veteran wide receivers. They didn't put a lot of money there, but how does Roseman, is he doing something that no one else has figured out, or they just don't know how to duplicate, where he's able to get A.J. Brown, Smith, Hurts, Barkley? And then I think the biggest difference between what they do and everybody else is he's paying the offensive line too. I mean, those guys are making some big money up there. So what is it that Roseman is able to do to get all these guys paid and happy?
Well, there's no one answer, and there's no, soundbite to answer that. But he's able to get good contracts. Now, there are a lot of money being spent, but Jordan Mailata is not making what the top tackles make. Devontae Smith is not making what top even 1A receivers make. And as I mentioned, Reddick was making $15 million a year. Top pass rushers are making twice that. So he has played the game. Now, the other thing is they're doing a lot of voids where you take a cap, bonus is prorated for cap purposes over a certain number of years. If you have a void, you can void out future years. So basically that's pushing out the pain. So there will be some cap pain going forward. But when you look at this roster and you look at Saquon Barkley being the seventh highest paid player on offense, think about that. What could be the MVP is the 7th highest paid player on a team's offense. behind Hurts and Johnson and Mulata and Smith and Brown and Dickerson. Wow, that's amazing.
It's going to be interesting to see what Howie does this offseason with Becton. I'm sure that – and Bond. Bond's going to need to get paid. Becton, I'm sure, came out of nowhere to have a year at guard. So we'll see his contractual gymnastics this offseason, we'll say. I want to get your take. I know you got to run here. Kellen Moore looks like he's going to go to the Saints, although the Saints got some big problems, it looks like. I don't know if I want to be a part of that organization now if I'm Kellen Moore. But if he ends up leaving, how tough is it to overcome changing that position 4 straight years?
I'm sorry, what position is that?
The offensive coordinator. If Kellen Moore leaves, sorry.
I mean, that is hard because what the obvious point is about these two teams is the continuity, especially at head coach and quarterback. And that is hard, but I think it's a testament to this team and this organization that they lose these coordinators, obviously.
So that's the one thing with Kansas City, right? Spagnuolo and Bieniemy were there. No one really came after those two guys. I know Bieniemy left, and then Nagy just stepped right in there. So they've had, because Andy had some problems here when he started to lose guys. Yeah,
I know. It's going to be tough. And I don't know the inner workings of the offensive staff. My sense is there's somebody on that staff that's being groomed if and when Moore leaves, or they'll do what they did with Vic Fangio and go out and pay. I mean, listen, the news I just saw about an hour ago is Chip Kelly going to the Raiders for $6 million a year. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. And Spagnuolo's at $5 million. I don't know what Fangio's out, but these guys are making more than head coaches, these older coordinators that make a difference on these teams.
Andrew Brandt, the Business of Sports podcast. Make sure you download that and take a listen. It's always must-listen NFL fans out there and a lot of other stuff. It's very good on the inside business of sports. He was a consultant with the Eagles, the vice president of player finance with the Green Bay Packers. By the way, I just watched the Aaron Rodgers Netflix the other day. That was a very interesting. What an evolution of human being that guy's gone through. But Andrew, always enjoy the podcast, and we appreciate you coming on.
Always enjoy it. Take care, Mike.
All right, Andrew Brandt, everybody, former Philadelphia Eagles front office and Green Bay Packers.